Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to SafeNet's Software License Enforcement webinar. Today we're going to be discussing obviously a very interesting topic based on the number of signups we have, moving from hardware dongle security to software-based security. I'm Justin Benson. I oversee sales for the Americas for SafeNet in our SRM division. I have Dale Hopkinson with me, who's an SE for SafeNet, based out of the Chicago area. And I'm also very happy to have Matt Lamson with us, who is a technical marketing manager at Cisco, who can talk about a real-world experience of moving from hardware-based dongles to software-based dongles. So thanks, everybody. As per usual, if you'd like to submit questions, feel free to submit them during the course of the presentation. I'll speak a little at the start, then we'll get through Dale, and then Matt will give us some slides on a case study, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. So feel free to submit those questions as you think of them throughout. I'm moving forward on the agenda slide. Hopefully it moved forward for everybody. Again, we'll talk a little bit about SafeNet, hardware versus software licensing, some of the solutions we have, and then a case study. For those of you who are not familiar with SafeNet, we are around about 25,000 customers in 100 companies. We're the third largest independent global security firm. We do just under $500 million a year in revenues. The particular division we're in, we're one of three areas. We're in the SRM, software rights management. We also provide security technologies for the federal government and for enterprises that protect data at rest and data in transit, high encryption satellites. We're involved in that. But for today specifically, we're going to talk about our solutions in the software rights management group. Here is our fancy marketing slide, 15,000 customers worldwide. We are fairly evenly spread globally from a revenues perspective, and a customers, it's not particularly centered in one region or the other. We certainly have customers worldwide, support worldwide, and are in 32 unique verticals. So from a very high level, our product and services portfolio, many of you know Sentinel HASP. It was Aladdin HASP, and now is Sentinel HASP for those customers that have come through from the Aladdin acquisition. It's great to have you here. HASP is our, what we call the out-of-the-box licensing security solution. Rapid learning curve, rapid deployment, Windows platform specific, and as many of our customers use that. We also have on the licensing side Sentinel RMS. That's more of our enterprise-grade licensing toolkit. Supports multiple platforms, is software licensing based in general, and the customers we have on that typically larger customers and well-known enterprise company names. We also have a back office solution that we call EMS, entitlement management solution. A lot of creating licensing, and delivering it and managing it and tracking it can be a whole distinct headache from the actual licensing itself. And that's what EMS tackles. It works with our software, our licensing, works with third-party licensing as well, and is also the backbone behind our latest offering, which is our SaaS-based solution. So, many of the same challenges that software companies face for years in terms of licensing their products in the perpetual world, those types of challenges are now faced by SaaS providers. What if I want to sell it, as a time-based, a 30-day subscription? What if I want to sell it for 365 days? What if I want some customers to only get certain features and not others based on price points or regions? What if I want to trial features with them? All those same types of challenges are there for SaaS companies as they are for better-known on-premise companies. We have a solution that helps companies solve that problem, and getting a lot of interest from hybrid too, from traditional ISVs that are looking at rolling out SaaS applications. So, and then lastly, tying that all together is our professional services group. Whether it's straightforward things like a security audit of your existing environment through to long-term engagements, particularly around streamlining your back office processes, we have a team that can help manage that. All right, so specifically moving into today's topic, and for us, the majority of our customers are hardware-based, keys-based customers. And in talking with our customers and prospects as well, but certainly our customers, we're seeing a drive towards software-based licensing typically to complement, sometimes to thoroughly replace, but either way, an interest in moving from hardware-based, dongle-based licensing to software. Some of the drivers we list out here, is customer demand. Certain customers or verticals have a preference for soft licensing over hardware-based licensing. Another reason could be speed of delivery. A hardware key is a physical key, and it needs to ship out, it needs to travel and go through transit. Soft licenses can be delivered real time. Sort of flowing into that is the cost. Hardware keys have a fixed cost, including shipping and managing on your side. Software license keys can scale much better. That can be particularly relevant to trialware-based solutions and or lower priced products. And then application trial demo, where we talked about that. You can give the customer a chance to use your product, and sometimes for some companies, getting a trial version into a customer's hands as quickly as possible is critical in their mind. So then having to ship out a key that takes, even if it's quick, could be 1 to 3 days, is kind of a momentum killer. So digging a little bit more specifically on some of those issues. So for customer verticals, there are customers that that do not have experience using dongles, that purchase, if you have a large enterprise company that maybe always use software-based licensing, if they buy Oracle, if they buy IBM, they're trained to not expect licensing or expect software licensing. They can be, perplexed by the existence of a hardware dongle and push back on a vendor because of that. Some companies that haven't done licensing at all up until now, and they're thinking about moving into it, they find that maybe putting out soft licensing is an easier transition point for customers. And then in certain, and I think we'll touch upon this a little bit later, in certain deployments, the fact that the key sits in a USB port and protrudes can be, an issue from a rack space perspective, from an environment perspective, and customers would like to not have anything protruding from a USB port. Speed of delivery, we talked about, the obvious one is the immediacy of getting a software key out there via email or via a web portal. Also, in addition, if you're sending your keys cross borders, sometimes those keys get stuck in customs, or even worse, that package can disappear. That's not just a keys issue, that's for anybody who's ever had experience, shipping physical software products as well, CDs, DVDs. The costs. So those keys, when you use keys, they have to be stored and managed by you, and there's a cost associated with that, with literally programming them, shipping them out. You have people that manage that. Replacements or upgrades. If a customer loses that key, it costs you that same amount again. And then the hardware key is a fixed cost. So, if a key costs you $20, if you sell your product for $10,000, that's kind of a rounding error. If you're trying to sell a $100 product, that becomes 20% COGS, and that can, really be prohibitive. So sometimes that's what we see. And then lastly, on the software trial piece, if you have, a particular solution from us that can manage both with the same licensing generator, you don't have to use R&D resources to create a demo version of your software. You just use the self-licensing key to get that trial copy out there. And then, later on, if you'd like to move it to a hard key when they purchase, you can do it at that point. And you can also gain traction in previously untapped markets by increasing the accessibility, therefore, to your application. So I guess that begs the question, why isn't everybody just using self-licensing, period, from the get-go? And there still are some big drivers. As I say, more than a half of our customers are generating hardware keys as the primary license format. You still can't get away from the fact that dongles are more secure. and that's why people put up with them even from an international shipment perspective. And the delays and the costs, they're just more secure, and that can be very important in certain markets. Some end users are really attached to the portability, of a key. They can take their key dongle out of a machine, out of the USB port, walk across the office floor, fly across the country, fly across the world, sit down at a terminal, plug it in, and they're good to go again. So it definitely has a lot of portability like that. There are certain environments that do not allow for customers to easily access the internet. And in that case, a USB key as a license key is more helpful. And then some ISPs actually use the dongle itself as an asset. From an asset management perspective, they can track the dongle as a physical piece of hardware. So all this leads us to seeing blended models out there, hardware keys or software keys. Our customers will say, well, maybe for the U.S. or maybe for westernized Europe, we'll utilize software licensing. We're more comfortable with it. We think piracy is less of an issue, but for developing markets, new markets, we still want to go with the hardware key. Or they might say, we like the hardware keys, they're more secure, we're happy on our higher price point products using it, but we're going to go with software licensing for some of our lower price point products or for our trialware. And then also, migration from a third-party software licenses can be used to replace existing third-party dongles. So from best practices for software rights management, our thinking is when we develop our product suite is to make sure that it's flexible. The way we develop the products, the way we price the products, we're trying to be as neutral as we can between the form factor for your license. We don't have a lot of religion around it being a hard key. We don't have a lot of religion around it being software license. We really want to be able to let you guys decide for this particular market, this product, this price point, we're going to go with this method. And we should be as neutral in that decision-making process as possible. We also want to ensure that you're secure, that you don't, go out there and inadvertently open up backdoors for abusing your products or having abuse occur because you didn't go with a hardware dongle for those reasons and you didn't think about a software license as an alternative. And then lastly, by creating the products so that they're agnostic about the license form type, it means our customers can standardize on one solution, which is easy to manage. If you build an integration to your ERP or your CRM, it's only that one integration. You don't have multiple things going on. You start to extract the additional value of tracking and managing your customer base that a good license and entitlement management solution should provide. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Dale, and he's going to drive from here and talk a little bit more specifically about the solutions that we have. Dale?
Yeah, so Justin was just kind of mentioning the flexibility and everything with the solution. This is just kind of a high-level view of the entire solution itself, the Sentinel HAS solution. So, of course, we do offer a complete solution allowing you to do, protection, securing application, hardening from that side, and also implementation of licensing. And one thing that Justin had mentioned is really we're trying to separate that two process. In fact, the solution does. It separates the process from protection to licensing. So that really offers you the ability now to do licensing on the fly. You can mix and match your licenses. And it's also really it's really fully integrated with your existing software product lifecycle, this solution. And that's just to enable and minimize any kind of disruptions to your development and business processes. It's a role-based tool, so it really allows your entire staff to focus on their core competencies. As you see there as well, you can also mix and match keys. So as Justin mentioned, we don't really, by the protection, lock you down to a particular key, which gives us a good segue into this particular slide. As you kind of see the application in action. So where you see the application, you can just think of this is your protected application. However you decide to harden it, we do have two ways. Of course, we offer an API as well as our envelope, the file wrapper. You can use one or both. And here you see on the left-hand side of the application, if you did do that kind of demo process, a trialware, demoware, freeware, whichever terminology best EPS use. We do allow that. You can define between 1 and 90 days of use of demo version of the software. Here you see that single application can either work now as a software key. The full version can work with a software key or hardware key. Again, you can mix and match your licenses. The application is not tied to a particular key by default. If that is something you do want to do to tie it to a particular key, you of course can do that. But the default action is, again, to allow you the flexibility to either use that hardware key, software key to mix and match to your customer's needs, the market's needs, and just what's ultimately best for the business. And having that ability to of course, have the flexible licensing, it really comes down to allow you to choose the right licensing models. Again, as I just mentioned, whether it's for your that particular vertical, that particular customer, what have you. And really with the choosing of licensing models, because we did separate that process of protection and licensing, anytime you need to change or alter a license model, you don't need to recall the R&D team, the R&D resources. It's one bill of the application, and everything now functions by licensing models. And it's not even necessarily the application itself. You can alter the licensing models, but if you decide to license individual functionalities or modules within the application, those licenses are also independent of one another. So let's say you have a particular application, like you can have feature A is limited by time, as you're seeing here on the screen, but then feature B is a commuter license, while feature C is a perpetual license. So you can mix and match those different licenses as you see fit. And again, that's without the requirement of calling the R&D team to have a new build to alter that particular license, but just keep them focused on their core competencies. And that's what, I just really want to touch on a very high level. So I'll just give it back to Justin so we can just continue on from here.
Thanks very much for that, Dale. So moving forward to the next slide, what I want to do is introduce Matt. Matt is a technical marketing engineer for Cisco. Matt worked for a company called Inlet Technologies, and Inlet was recently acquired by Cisco. So if you see the name Inlet on the slides, that's the background for you. And Matt's an existing customer of ours and was kind enough to come along today to talk about their experiences. So Matt, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. So Inlet Technologies, I don't know if you're familiar with, but what we do is we have a live and a on-demand solution for encoding and transcoding video. So we can take your live feed, such as things like the Olympics, Sunday Night Football, Major League Baseball, any kind of major large event that's going live right now, we take that video feed and we can make it available we transcode it and make it available for your cell phones, for different web environments, for iPhone, for iPad, for a lot of set-top boxes, Xbox. We do a lot of work for that. So we have a live product as well as an on-demand product. And particular for this presentation, I'm going to talk about our on-demand. We have both a physical USB keys. We actually are using the previous Aladdin, keys. So we have those for our production, and then we were using the software-based licenses originally for evaluation purposes. So we did have that kind of mesh to begin with. A lot of our customers were using high-end desktop workstations for their encoding video. That just happened to be the trend at the time. They would use the highest, the best of the best kind of PCs that they had to encode their video. As time moved on, we've realized that 64-bit OS, more RAM, more space, better CPUs. We realized that customers were starting to move towards servers and blades because they could provide better performance. So we really knew that we needed to look at other methods of using our licensing. Reasons being is because with the blades and servers, a lot of times there's either they have the doors or the rack space, or they just don't have USBs. So a lot of our licensing, they actually require multiple nodes, meaning, each individual piece, which hopefully you can see from the icon on the left or the picture on the left, you have a server node, you have an analysis node, you have an encode node, there's a post-encode node. So all of these can either be individually licensed, so they would be individual PCs, or you can have them kind of meshed together and shared. And a lot of our customers were using the individually licensed, so that means that they would have a lot of PCs spread throughout, their environment, and it would just be a lot of stacking up and things like that. It was effective. It worked really well for them, but in terms of physical space, it wasn't very efficient, And then on top of what they mentioned previously, it was just a higher cost and more time required to mail these keys. And it was just a lot easier. So that was kind of how we did things at Inlet. Recently, we've actually been acquired by Cisco, and with that, we realized that a lot of our new customers and previous customers, they're moving towards these servers and blades. So Cisco has this UCS platform, which is all blades and all servers. There's limited to no USB ports at all on these, and server rack space is limited. There's no the doors on them. They don't typically have the parallel ports that you can plug in the adapters for. Sometimes there's no USB drives. So really, software-based licenses were pretty ideal for that. Again, they could be individually licensed or shared, so it kind of works the exact same way, exactly as it did with the physical keys. It's just now it's software-based. You don't have to worry about potentially breaking the keys, and bumping into them and falling out, losing them. There's a lot of different things. Software, it's on the machine, so it's good to go. You don't really have to lose any of that. And obviously, the cost and time to mail to the customers is much less. Just an email, a couple things there, and it was just very, very simple. So I'm going to actually take a quick step back from the previous slide, just so that way you can kind of see the workflow that we had. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have about 8 different machines here, and they're all kind of spread out. And the picture over on the right here is actually one of our customers. This is their transition over to the blades, and you can kind of see the adapters. We realized that wasn't working very well. So from that movement, we went over to these kind of systems with the software, and it was perfect for these blades because you can stick all of them in a single chassis, and you don't have anything hanging. There's no dongles. There's no nothing. It's worked really, really well so far.
Did we lose you, Matt? Or are you still there?
No, I am here. Sorry. I'm trying to think of anything else that I wanted to share, but I think that was pretty much everything that I wanted to give.
Okay, good. So now what we wanted to do was open it up for Q&A. I've already seen several questions come in, over during the presentation. So what we'll do is we'll get into Q&A, and I'll go through the questions and ask you guys as it relates to this. So I think the first question actually would be for Dale. One of the questions we got, Dale, was actually one thing. We saw a comment or two there, Dale, about you're difficult to hear. So if you could speak a little more closely to the microphone. But for you, Dale, why are dongles more secure than software-based licensing?
Sure, great question. So with the dongles, you always have that physical access. So we, of course, manufacture our dongles ourselves, and we have our factories. So I'm actually looking at a broken dongle I broke to look at the chip. Inside the dongle, we have the microprocessor, we have memory on board, and we have a cryptographic engine on board. So, of course, these physical components makes it much stronger when we do a software license. Though we do secure that software license on the machine, we do have to rely and require elements of the machine which is out of our control. So since we do lose that ability to control those elements, we do have to say it's less secure as a dongle. Though the software license is still secure, but this is why any dongle is usually much stronger than software license, because it do have that physical component of it with those read-only memory, the engine on board, and so forth.
Okay, good. I think this next one actually might stay with you, Dale. There's 2 or 3 questions in there, and they're really the same vein, which is, what do I need to do what's the technological path or challenge to implement software-based licensing if I'm a HASP customer today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a great question. So the initial answer to that, it relies on the particular version you're using, so I can kind of give it in 2 quick scenarios. The best case scenario is you're already using one of these Sentinel HASP versions. Then, of course, once you obtain the particular module from your sales personnel, but on the technical side, all you do is actually produce the software license through the licensing tool. The protection you implemented is the same protection as used by the software license, but the only thing now becomes a little bit differently in deployment. So as you would normally write and create a license to burn directly to a dongle, there's an option in the licensing tool to actually generate a product key. You would utilize that product key, and you would go through the software activation process. And the software activation process is very similar as we're accustomed today. Microsoft kind of created this whole topology. We offer an API as well as an out-of-the-box tool to do that. And of course, the end customer is faced with something that says, please enter your key, your product key. They simply enter that key, and now what happens is the activation process. That server, the licensing server can be hosted by you, hosted by us, or a third party. That's your decision. But that key is sent to the server validates it, and once everything is okay, it now appends that license to that particular machine. But the protection side is exactly the same. It's just a bit of a difference on deployment side. We do have tutorials for that if it's something you want to look at, or we can follow up with more in-depth details, after if you'd like to.
Okay, good. All right, Matt, a question for you. When moving do you still expect some of your customers will want hardware keys, or do you think that they'll all be open to moving towards software licensing?
So I think the overall goal is to hope that everyone's going to be ready for software. Realistically, I think people, it's one of the things kind of hard to teach a new dog or an old dog new tricks kind of thing. They like the hardware, they use the hardware, they love it. But I can tell you from experience, because I'm actually the one who fulfills the licenses, as far as my company goes or my group goes. I have numerous customers of ours, who are literally changing their entire business or their whole work plan from hardware-based to software, and that's over 50-plus licenses that they're doing at once, from hardware straight to software. So I think it's going to be a mix of both. I think in the perfect world it'd be all software, but yeah, it'll probably be both.
Okay, good. Back to you, Dale. A number of questions basically focused on internet connectivity or lack thereof. How do you handle licensing in a world where that won't require an internet connection and doesn't need a local license server for activation? Can you do that? Dale, I don't know if you've got us on mute.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to turn it off mute. Good one. Yes, I was just mentioning, as far as the internet and the licensing, it's not required to have any kind of constant connection. There's no kind of server ping back and forth. There is required, a activation piece. The activation can happen ideally if this machine with your software is on the internet. Then you can go ahead and do that direct process. If not, then you can do what's known as sneakernet. So you can kind of create the software license hash. And really, that's just a fingerprint. You can create it on that particular machine. Now you can bring that file, put it on a flash drive or some kind of media, and bring it now to an internet-connected zone. This is just to confirm that when you do activate this customer, they're going to have that license bound to that particular machine, and they can, of course, move that without your knowledge and try to duplicate that license. But there's no kind of constant internet connection that's needed, to do that process.
Okay, good. Staying with you, Dale, you're getting good workout today. A number of questions, basically, saying I use my hardware dongles for this type of licensing or this type of functionality. Could I do that in the software licensing world? So I think the questions boil down to: is there any type of licensing that is hardware key, hardware dongle specific, or could customers do the same type of licensing with a software-based licensing? Anything they should know about a gotcha or anything along those lines?
Okay, that's a great question again, by the way. So to us, the dongle is really agnostic and it's interchangeable. The only difference, of course, is that physical piece. I can't physically hold a software license. So from our eyes as well as the software's point of view, the licenses are exactly the same. So every single license you use for the hardware key, you can use in the software key. Of course, if you have the different hardware key types, if you need to do a time license, you need a different physical dongle. This is actually one of the benefits of the software license. Is you don't do anything differently. You just simply code that license that way. So every single license you can do with hardware, whether it's time, perpetual, the network-based licensing and so forth, you can do with the software licenses. All
right, good. There's a number of questions around VMware and virtual environments. We have a webinar on which we did probably about 2 months ago that specifically addressed VMware and licensing in a virtual world. So for those of you who've signed up for this and using this BrightTalk functionality, it's relatively easy to go back and look at the historical webinars. So I'm not avoiding the VM questions. As I say, there's a number of them in there, but just given the topic here, I don't want to head down the virtual machine because it's kind of a whole standalone discussion in itself, and there's a webinar on that, and or you can contact us if you have specific questions on that. Secondly, there's a number of questions around pricing, and there's a couple of different models that we have, two in particular for customers that are moving from hardware to software. Rather than get into trying to explain that over the phone, I would recommend that you follow up, send me an email directly or contact your salesperson. My email address is just jmbenson at SafeNet-Inc. But there is a couple of different ways to tackle it depending on what your thoughts are, if you're supplementing or going fully a full changeover. All right, so there's another question: is SafeNet going to stop supporting hardware dongles? Absolutely not. As I mentioned before, the majority of our customers use hardware dongles, and we're the leader in the space, via every meaningful metric. So, if you see me on the street corner with a bucket checking for change, then we've abandoned dongles. Otherwise, I don't think that's going to happen. All right. Let me move. So Matt, I have a question, which is: have you successfully made this transition, or are you going to make the transition?
So we've had, as far as full transition over from that, no, we have not we have not done 100% of that transition. We're slowly making that way. It's some of it you kind of have to pique the interest of the customer and let them know that we do have the software license option. You have to kind of say, hey, we have this, and we go that route. We plan on probably going fully licensed or software and or network based, or in some hardware maybe, but I think we're definitely getting there.
Okay, good. Thanks. One more for you, Dale. Is the software licensing solution capable of locking the software to a particular machine?
That's a great question. You definitely can do that. By default, the software is locked to a particular machine, of course, using a strong fingerprint. If you did also want to do something programmatically, you do have memory as well on the software key. So similar memory mapping as the hardware key. You have up to 4K read-write and 2K read-only. You have that same mapping on the software key. So let's say if you wanted to write like your own custom unique string, you can do that as well. But the default action is with the software license is locked to a machine. But again, if you want to strengthen that and do something unique, you do have that ability to do that as well.
All right, good. Maybe one for me. Is there a per license cost advantage to using the software license versus hardware key? That's a good question. There's no simple answer. I think there's definitely a cost advantage when some of the examples we talked about, where for trialware and or for lower priced products, and also for soft licensing, we tend to look at revenue under protection versus a per transaction. So that's when it can be beneficial as well. So there are definitely some scenarios where it works like that. I think for many of our customers, that's the area where they have price sensitivity. For some of them, though, for probably at least half, it's less about the cost savings and more about answering that customer demand and having that flexibility as well is a big part of it. For another question for Dale, there's 2 or 3 questions again around this topic. We've talked about Sentinel HASP. The Sentinel Super Pro customers, Sentinel Keys customers are asking the obvious question, how does this work for me? Is it difficult for me to make the change and to add the software-based licensing to my Super Pro hard keys?
Yeah, so great question that revolves around the migration piece. Usually what we've seen with any migration, it really comes down to logistics, how you want to deploy to the field. But on the technical side, it can be very simple. You can decide to either have the application to read both the new and the old key. So you can actually insert the API for the new Sentinel hasp as well. And the basic flow could be, on application starts, you of course choose a preference API you want to use, let's say SuperPro. Look for SuperPro key. If SuperPro key is found, run according to the license on the key. If it's not found, then look for now, of course, use a new API, look for the software license. If the software license is found, then run according to license. If no key is found, then of course you'll cache control that error message. But as far as the implementation side, the steps, let's see, it would be about, let's say, 5 or 6 steps or so with linking to the library and just making the basic call, call for software license or hasp login as the function is known as. It would be that simple. Of course, every migration is a case-by-case basis. So if you'd like to get more details on that, we can speak directly to you. You can contact your sales rep on that one. They'll get you in touch with the proper personnel.
Yeah. Okay, good. A couple of questions along the same vein. A question about transferring a software license key, Dale, transferring a software license key from one computer system to another. Is that doable, and if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, definitely you can do that. Again, that can be either in the automated fashion or the kind of same process I mentioned before with that SneakerNet, where the file is created and then sent to you via email on another location. But how would it look, let's say in an ideal situation, we do have a web service that does this kind of procedure. Your customer, you can actually build this into your own application. They can go to maybe like tools and move license or change machine, some kind of, functionality you would name. What would happen behind the scenes is a trigger would be sent to that license server. Again, we just want to verify, the licenses. So the license server would cancel that initial license, and it would return to that customer either a product key or a confirmation code. So now once this end customer goes to reinstall, they would need to use that same key, either the key or the code they received from the server, and the server now would reinstall that license on that particular machine. So this is just a way the server wants to validate and authenticate that particular user. In the event they're offline, simply, you would do that process where they would create that file, and this file has a unique ID and is tied with a encrypted and signed hash of that machine. And now they would either send that file to you, or they can actually go, if you decide to create some kind of website, they can upload that. But again, that process, it is available, and you can do it either automatically or kind of a manual procedure.
Okay, good. For trialware, does each prospective customer need a unique key, or can the same key be used? I guess that would be you, Dale.
Oh, great question. So for trialware, we actually make it very easy. Let's say trialware, we actually allow you to bundle that particular trial in your application installer. So you as a software vendor can create one version, one installer, and every customer, they can download this or however you distribute the trialware. Once they install, they get those terms. And of course, trialware, you can only install once per machine. We do have proper checks to make sure no one can do the timestamp or try to roll back the system clock. But it's only one per version, so you don't have to, to create trialware for every particular customer. If you did want to track the customer's usage or something like that, you can definitely tie that to a user activation. Not activation, a user registration. So you can kind of see who that prospective customer is and touch base with them, accordingly.
Okay, good. Again, for you, Dale, questions around tracking license usage, from a report perspective. So, and there's a number of different questions in there along these lines. How can I track the usage of the license? How can I get a report for which licenses have been used? Can you talk to that topic?
Yeah, definitely. So on the reporting side and usage side, we can look at that as kind of twofold. If you're thinking of licenses that's been created, that's been sold, we have a module in Sentinel has the reporting module, and those are one of the CAN reports that you can receive. So you can kind of see, what's being sold, what are your most popular licenses and features. If you're speaking more so the user tracking, that's also possible. But now you will need some kind of internet connection. You can decide to do this one of two ways. If you want to do some sort of real-time usage, you definitely would have to require that constant connection between, some sort of server and your customers. Or if you want to, just receive the usage, let's say every period, once a quarter or something like that, you would, of course, have to have that. This would be using an API, of course, to write that usage to a particular file. You, of course, can decide to use a key to encrypt that file so no one can open and tamper with it. And then that's a very simple part. But now you would have to define some kind of trigger, whether it's a particular day of the week, a particular time, particular quarter, daily, something like that, and then have that to send to a particular server of yours. Once you do that, that will be able to to track that. And then we do have our back office system. That's something of interest. Justin kind of mentioned in the early slides the entitlement management system piece. That actually does all of that for you. So this is something you're interested in. We definitely would recommend to contact a sales rep to get more information on that.
All right, good. A question from Matt. Matt, did you do any integration to either ERP or CRM with your licensing to track this data? And if so, could you just explain how that worked?
No, actually, we did not do any of those.
So when you generate new licenses for new orders, is it just a manual process where customers use the SRM interface and input it there to generate and program the key?
Well, yeah. So it's a little bit of the way that we have it. We kind of have a little bit of a manual process, but it's also kind of a communication between myself and then the customer. We present them with instructions on how to download and install the license onto their machine, and then what they do is they grab this license file, which is called a C2V, which basically is it's a file that basically represents what the key, what's on the key, right? And so we have a conversation back and forth, where they'll email the key or that file to us. We will upload the proper memory bits for our product onto that file, and then we'll send it back to them. They activate the license. It's then all of that memory is stored on that key from then on, and then therefore they can go ahead and install our product and use our product.
Okay. Well, good. That's helpful. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, 45 minutes before we bump into it. We probably got time for one more question. We've got a lot of questions today, which is great. There's some contact information that we put up on a slide. Again, my email address is jmbenson, BENSON. I got some emails here through the questionnaire, which I'll follow up on. But if you have a specific question, feel free to send it to me. If you don't know who your salesperson is, I'm happy to help connect you and or answer the question if I can. So I think, boy, there's so many questions here, but I think for a last one, we might go back to Dale and say, Dale, the question around roaming licenses. Is there an option for roaming licenses with SL?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, I'm thinking of maybe something like a user license or check-in, check-out, that kind of terminology. That definitely is available, and I'll kind of explain it quickly. This allows you in a network-type setting, if you sell like a 5-user seat, you can actually allow a user to go off the network. So if they're traveling, they will need to work from home. So we do offer this capability. And, of course, you can define how long, or the end customer can define how long they would like to allow their user to go home or to work offline. So we do have that capability.
All right, good. Well, thanks, Dale. Thanks very much, Matt, for your help today, and thanks everybody for attending. As I say, we've got north of 70 questions here, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. Some of them were similar in nature, so we hopefully got to a few of them. You can send me an email, safenet-inc.com. And if you'd like, you can still submit your questions afterwards. You pull them out in an Excel spreadsheet. If you leave your contact information there, we can follow up with you through that. There's also ability to give us a rating We only take good rating. No, we take any rating, but let us know, give us feedback if this was helpful. It feels like we could have gone on for another hour, perhaps, with all the questions we're getting, but hopefully this was valuable for you guys. Thanks very much. Thanks, Matt. And thanks to Dale. All right, thanks, everybody. Goodbye.